Alrighty, welcome back. So I wanted to just make a little interruption video, if you will, because it has been so long, and I have not been here to talk to you about ACOAs and the adult children of alcoholics dysfunctional family stuff. And as I mentioned in my previous video with trait number 4 and judging myself harshly, more harshly than anybody else, I also mentioned that I lost my mom. And so I lost a big part of my identity and at the same time a big part of this equation of adult children of alcoholics. Um, just to give you a little bit more information on that, since I lost my mom, my dad has tried to be more in my life, who was the alcoholic in the family, or who is the alcoholic in the family but is no longer drinking. And so that has kind of set me up to not really know what to expect in this life because I assumed that my dad would die first because he's older, about 10 years older than my mom was. And at the same time, um, I just didn't foresee anything. I mean, who does, right? Who foresees cancer? Who foresees these things happening? But I just figured I'd have my mom and my dad for at least 20, 30 more years. And when they got older, I figured we would talk about the things that had happened in my life so that they can absolve themselves from their sins, the things that they've done that were not great to treatment of me or other people in our family. And when my mom left, there was definitely some lack of resolution with that. And that's partially because she didn't want to talk about it, and that's partially because she left too soon. I think that she would have eventually gotten to the place where she felt like she could talk about it, but her time came too soon. So, that being the case, this is why I wanted to pick this video series back up and hopefully help other people out. Now that I've done a lot of work on myself, a lot of processing my grief of the loss of my mom, I recently lost two people in the last month that were either meaningful to me or the community or both. And I do volunteer work in the community a lot. And so that's just been very hard. I went to one of the funerals this morning, and I feel like with the bereavement support that I've had from Hospice of the Valley, with the bereavement group, the dinner party that I was able to start virtually in March of 2020 when the pandemic hit, and then also all of the therapy sessions and the counselors that I've seen along this journey, I feel a lot more readily equipped to handle grief and loss, and yet it still hurts and it still stings. And so I wanted to just kind of mention that before I get into this next piece, which are, I wanted to talk about the tools of adult children of alcoholic recovery, which is, again, I had referenced this in the 8-year-old video. But it's on the adultchildren.org website. Don't mind my cats in the background jumping up on the cat tree. So tools of ACA recovery include going to meetings, which I did go to meetings for a while. I know I just said sins in this video. I am a religious person. I have found religion. I found religion when I was a younger person, and I converted officially in 2015. And I, at the same time, don't want to put faith into a 12-step program. It's not for me. I had gone several times over the course of several months. Actually, I probably went maybe 10 to 15 times over several months. I say several times, but I had tried various adult children of alcoholic groups out. And even in the LGBTQ inclusive one, it was still really hard to be in those spaces because they talked about, you know, believing in a higher power to absolve me of my sins, or to, they don't say the word sins either, but to um to let things go, right? And while I believe that I should be able to let things go, I believe also that people should take responsibility and be accountable for what they have done. And so I wanted to have those conversations with my mom before she left, and I wanted to have conversations with my dad. And my dad and I aren't close, and we are getting closer because of the loss of my mom. And I'm hoping that as he gets older and as he becomes a more aged person that he and I can have these conversations before he goes, because he is the one that was the alcoholic in the family. He was the one that was physically abusive. My mom was more emotionally neglectful. Um, and that's a different story. But I think she became that way because of, in part, what he had done to affect our family. So it's all really connected. So the tools for ACA recovery or ACOA recovery include meetings. Again, I stopped going to those meetings just because I didn't find them super appropriate or helpful for me. Sorry, I'm very privileged to live in a very active community where there is a vendor every Saturday night that honks his horn, and I don't even know what he's selling. I haven't checked out what he is selling yet, and I've lived here, well, a little over 2 months now. But I will eventually, one of these Saturdays, figure out what he's selling. Looks like maybe ice cream or snow cones or something like that, which I'm not a super huge fan of desserts, but I will check it out. I will patronize him at some point. Okay, so going to meetings. Meetings are definitely not something that I felt comfortable with, so I did not stick with those for very long. Reading the literature, however, and learning about the experiences of others, and also gaining clarity on my own experiences is definitely something that I have done. As I mentioned, the Adult Children of Alcoholics book is there. There's a lot of literature that I referenced in my first video if you check out the description box. And there continue to be studies, groups, uh, uh, online discussion boards as the internet expands about adult children of alcoholic traits, our laundry list, and what we do. So I think through therapy, through bereavement groups, as I mentioned, I'm clarifying that, but reading books really helped me to start to understand from an objective standpoint, why am I different than a lot of my friends, and what do I have in common with a lot of ACOAs? We define and enforce our boundaries. This is a hard one for me. I just left my grandparents' house. I moved in with them after my mom passed, and after I had a terrible kind of situation with my previous landlord who had bought the building from the landlord before that. And the landlord before that, he was great. But the guy that bought it was basically just trying to push us out. And so he didn't fix my air conditioning in the middle of a Phoenix summer. I know, it's hot as hell. And there was this light outside that was kind of sparking, and it was an electrical hazard, fire hazard, that he refused to fix. And he just kept giving me excuses and giving me excuses. And finally, I was like, you know what? I don't want to live here anymore because I don't want to deal with you. It's not that I don't love this place, it's that I don't want to deal with you. So when I moved out into my grandparents' home, the point was to support them because while my uncle lives there, he does not support them. He doesn't do anything for them. He doesn't go to the store for them. He doesn't cook for them. In fact, it's the other way around. My grandma will be doing all of the things for him, and he's an almost 60-year-old man. So that being the case, um, I felt like I needed to help around the house. I needed to make sure that they, in their older age, had the ability to not do so much. And in doing so, as my family has reminded me throughout the last 2 years that I live with them, that they take advantage of the situation. So I have a job. I've had a job my entire adult life, and they said, "Well, if you have a job, you have to pay rent." And I was okay with that, though it was not something that we agreed upon when I first moved in. And I paid that rent. But then my uncle, I found out, does not pay any rent. He doesn't. He only was only paying the cable bill, which the cable bill was comparable. But it's going to be his house when my grandparents pass away. He will get the house, and he's not paying any money into it. So that doesn't make any sense to me. The other piece, and it was his house before, so they took over the mortgage because he couldn't afford it when he was without a job for a while. But then he has had a job for the last 25 or so years, and so why not be paying on it? Um, and then my brother moved in July, and that really is where the boundaries started to seem unfair. My grandpa had fallen because of his blood pressure. He was taking some incorrect medications that his doctors had overprescribed to him. And there were other things that were also problematic because he wasn't taking his insulin, he wasn't checking his blood sugar, et cetera, et cetera. And the point was that my grandma refused to pay for a lot of the medical supplies, the food that he was supposed to eat, right? He's not supposed to eat cream of wheat, which is high in sodium and potassium, and carbs, which means sugar. He's supposed to eat things that are sugar free. He's supposed to eat things that are more natural sugars like fruit, but not in high amounts. And she just didn't want to pay for those things because, of course, fruit is more expensive than bread. So that meant that I was paying out of pocket for those things. And I allowed them to push that boundary. And so even in my most recent years, boundaries are hard for me, but they're harder for me with family. And I think it's because of the ACOA, um, because ACOA stuff, the experience that I had when I was younger, pushed me uh, to a place where there's always an obligation to the family, right? I would take care of my brother when my dad was drunk and beating my mom. When uh, my mom wasn't around um, and my dad was drunk, I would take care of my dad. So I was made into an adult very quickly. I was given responsibilities very early on in life. And that meant that I had to forego my own boundaries and not define boundaries for myself when it came to family. And it still plays out in my family now, even with my grandparents who were not any part of the alcoholism in my youth with my dad. So it's hard. Boundaries are hard for me still, but I eventually said no. I'm not paying for any more stuff. I'm not paying any more rent. And then I decided to leave because of different things that were happening that I could talk about maybe in another video. We work and use the 12 steps and the 12 traditions. So, again, if you're in the program, you will. However, I do not follow the 12 steps and the 12 traditions. It's very AA based, and I understand that, but at the same time, there are differences between being a person that is an alcoholic that has ruined somebody's life, a child's life, and made that person forever need therapy and support as an ACOA, and being somebody that's trying to recover from that situation of that trauma. We identify the people, places, and things that are healthy and useful to our lives today, and we discard those that are not. I've done a really good job of this over the years, especially in the middle of college and post college. I learned there are a lot of toxic people out of and there are a lot of people that have been asking things of me that I thought were inappropriate. And because of all the issues and the concerns with my family, I do have very good boundaries with people in my life. And if somebody wanted to challenge those boundaries, I would say, get the F out. I don't need you in my life. There's no point to this. I don't put myself in a position where I allow that to happen to me because, as person to person, and you're not related to me, I don't have to be around you. I'm not obligated to do anything. And again, that's why the family part is so hard, but I do okay with boundaries with other people. We reconnect with our inner child or our true self. Yes, I have been trying to do that through therapy for the longest time. It is true. We work with a sponsor and build support networks. I don't because I'm not in a group, but I do build support networks and I do talk to people about how being an adult child of an alcoholic does affect my interactions with my mom and my dad today, or with my siblings today, or my future, how I think about things, my job, all of the things that it affects. I realize that this is a part of it. And so I mention it at any chance that I can get so that people know who I am in my totality includes being an adult child of an alcoholic and having those issues. And then, of course, when we attend meetings, we focus on issues on which we need work. So, to put it in better terms for me, I realize where I need work. I need work with boundaries with my family, but not on boundaries with random people or my friends, because I choose my friends that support and appreciate and enforce my boundaries as well. And then, of course, give service in ACA. And I think that's something that I do again, through all of these other groups, through my community work, I talk about being an adult child of an alcoholic when appropriate, when I can, to bring awareness to it, because I still feel now, even 8 years later, there's still a lot out there that has not been talked about in regard to ACOA. So stay tuned for the next video where I talk about the laundry list and the flip side of the laundry list and the new laundry list with its flip side.